I'm Brian Christner, and this is The Byte, a bite-sized podcast about containers, cloud, and tech. All right, welcome back to The Byte, episode number 64. Joining me today is Chuck Gehman. He's based in Minneapolis, but he's originally from New York. Welcome, Chuck.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And how's the weather on your side today? Is it
It's a little cloudy today, but it's nice and warm, which is great. So it's been beautiful here. So which is not characteristic for Minneapolis. So.
right? Spring can go either way.
But yeah. We just the weekend was all rain, so constantly.
And you're originally from New York. How did you end up in Minneapolis?
I came here for a job, actually a really interesting job, and we lived in I worked in New York City for almost 6 years. Most recently, I mean, I'm originally from New York. I've moved around a lot. I've lived in a lot of different places in the U.S. Traveled a lot outside of the U.S. And so we did our stint in New York. My wife had never lived there, and it was super fun. And our kids are getting a little bit older, and we wanted to live in a little bit more country-ish environment. So we're on the outskirts of Minneapolis, which Minneapolis has good culture and a lot of good things going on. But then we also have this great little town that we live in. So it's nice.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
And you get all the seasons and everything. I mean, growing up in the desert in Vegas and Arizona, the season was just like warm rain or cold rain, when it did rain. That was it. So I just want to understand, you're currently working at Perforce. Can you tell us a little bit about Perforce?
Sure. Yeah, Perforce is a really interesting story. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years. I joined the company right after the founder, who was and the owner, the sole owner, pretty much, really, really smart guy, engineer named Christopher Seawald, sold the company to private equity. Company was founded in 1995 as a version control system, and that's what Perforce is primarily known for, and in the circles that it's known for. I mean, everybody today thinks of Git as the only version control system there is. But there are certainly a lot of people using SVN, and incredibly, there are people using ClearCase, and so Perforce was one of the two VCS systems that came out in 1995, unbelievably, to replace CVS, and the other one was SVN. And a lot of people don't know that either of us are still around, especially but so after this, sort of Perforce 2.0 began in 3 years ago, really in late 2016. The company moved its headquarters from San Francisco to Minneapolis, and that was because of our CEO, who lives here. Actually, our chairwoman, Janet Dreyer. She was like, "All right, yeah, I'll run this company if I can move the headquarters to Minneapolis." So I joined when there were about 40 people here in Minneapolis, which happened very, very quickly. Now we have over 150 here in Minneapolis.
Incredible. Wow.
But we've grown tremendously, and we're really kind of a different company, but at our core is still the version control system, which a lot of people don't know is it's used by 8 out of 10 of the top semiconductor companies. It's used by 19 out of 20 of the top game development studios.
Now, game development, you mean video games, correct?
Yeah. So
wow. Okay.
It's really like we're the industry standard in video games. So if you go to the game development conference in San Francisco, as I was supposed to about a month and a half ago, but it got canceled. Everyone there knows us, right? And everyone in the room pretty much is our customer. and it's very fun because people are coming up and saying hi, and our customers are coming over to our booth, and
Nice.
there's certainly still the game development world is on this incredible trajectory. There's so much growth. There's so much activity that we still are, getting new customers all the time. So it's pretty exciting.
And now I think even with COVID, the whole esports is like increasing significantly because now you're seeing like Formula One races, MotoGP, all these have been canceled in real life, and
Yeah,
all the professional athletes are actually going online and racing esports athletes.
yeah,
So it's really cool to see this.
that is incredibly cool. There's a big team here. Gosh, I guess it's like the Rockers or something. I can't remember the name of it,
Okay.
but it's like Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you know him. He's like a crazy marketer from New York, and he's one of the part owners of the Minneapolis team in this league. I think it's Activision League.
Okay.
And it's just there's so much investment in it, and the timing was really good.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Although they were planning to do these big live events, but now they're just going back to right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. But
I mean,
yes,
it's quite remarkable. I mean, everyone, as you mentioned, is when you think of version control, you're always thinking of Git or GitHub or GitLab, and we forget where we came from, to be honest, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's there's still a whole world out there, and I'm sure, like you said, the semiconductor, the game industry is all your customers, your main customers, and
yeah.
I'm sure you have thousands of customers that are out there,
We,
and it
we
just should open everybody's eyes that there's more than one solution to version control.
yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, we have a different value proposition in terms of we handle millions of files and large files, and you can do all the different development models, trunk-based development that you would do with any version control system in our system. But a lot of people are mono repos, right? Which is interesting. So,
Yep.
um, but we have the tools for people to succeed that you don't see in other version control systems. And then we have a different branching model that's very, very sophisticated, where your branches can have one file in them. You can be permissioned to
Okay.
one file, right? You can be permissioned to, you can just bring down to your workstation 3 files if you want to. You don't have to bring the whole
Okay.
repo down, right? So, which makes it great when you're a non-code contributor is a big thing we have. We have hardware
Exactly.
system, and then we have the game scenery. We've got the audio. We have video clips.
So we can really split it
Yeah,
all out, granular control, and yep.
yeah. So it's really it's something that people don't normally investigate unless they're in one of these industries, right? And then we certainly have there's great traceability in our system too. So we have like these life safety medical device, safety critical systems,
Hmm.
and then some, financial services customers who are concerned about security. And then the other interesting thing about it is we're a centralized model, which for years has been denigrated by people,
Yep.
extolling the virtues of Git, being a DVCS, right?
Hmm.
But what's sort of happened in the world is that everybody works centralized now, right? You're not
Yes.
sharing stuff from your workstation with your colleague sitting next to you, even, right? Sometimes, but
Exactly. Not very
but
often.
and not with Git either, but some other way maybe, I'm just
Yep.
dragging and dropping or something. Um, but what's happened with us and things like virtualization in the cloud, especially the cloud, is that we are a commercial software system and we license by the seat, but you can have as many servers of ours as you want. And servers are very small and powerful. And so they can be deployed as replicas, right? So,
Okay.
you've got, people working remote in another city, you can
Mm-hmm.
deploy an edge server. We call them edge servers, and they've been called that for years before edge computing became,
I'm sure,
a thing, which is
in
interesting.
trend.
Yeah. We have a bunch of different kinds of replicas. So you can put a replica in Montreal. For some reason, a lot of the game developers have a bunch of Montreal studios. I guess there's a lot of creativity in Montreal, which is cool.
Nice.
And so so you put an edge server in there, and it serves all the people in Montreal, formerly in your studio, now sitting at home.
Yes.
But it's a different model, but it works really, really well, and it's super high performance. I think our server itself is it's written in C. It's got this Berkeley DB at its core, which is also interesting, but something that a lot of people don't even know about.
Exactly.
Um,
But
it's
super efficient, fast, lightweight.
and small, right? And there's that Slack message. Sorry.
No worries.
But so what I was
Also,
gonna say is,
just to change gears for a moment,
sure.
You mentioned in our previous conversation that your motto or your old motto for the company is version everything, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really, I'm still blown away by your company. And can you explain your role within Perforce and what's your day-to-day engagement like?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm actually, Perforce is very how should I put it? We a lot of us wear a lot of different hats, right? And so my official title is technical marketing engineer, but I'm also one of our cloud strategists. So I work with a ton of people on AWS and Azure, and a little bit on GCP as well. But and so day to day, I'm doing things like, well, I'm working a lot with customers now, in the current scenario with the lockdown and whatnot. People have a lot of needs to reconfigure how their networking is set up to work with us, and where the servers are. Moving things to the cloud has become a really good and urgent thing for a lot of people. Even people who were already planning to do it accelerated it. So we're working really closely with like the game tech people at AWS, and so that's been a day-to-day of mine for the last few weeks. Other large customers as well, and non-game dev. And then I do things like make videos, do sample code, do demos, which is a lot of fun. And I use this experience that I get from customers to come up with great topics that people would be interested in. So write blogs. There's many I've written, probably, I don't know, over the last 3 years. 150 plus blogs.
Oh, very nice.
Almost entirely on Perforce's website. So, and working with engineers to help them make blogs, which is also really, really fun. So
exactly, it's exciting because I'm a big enabler also of people writing, because it kind of forces you to think about the problem differently, right?
Yeah.
When you have to explain it in text where it's like repeatable and people can understand it, it's a different way to engage the content versus just telling somebody, oh, click here, click here.
Yeah,
it's you really have to go through. I don't know if you've seen the video or not, where there's a dad and 2 kids, and he tells the 2 kids to write on a piece of paper how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. And and the kids just can't do it, and he tries to reenact it, and the peanut butter goes on top of the peanut butter jelly sandwich, and it just keeps going out of control. It's just hilarious. It's difficult. It's a craft.
I'm gonna look at that. That's great. Cool.
And this actually brings me to the next topic, is you're a writer. I mean, not only a blogger, but you've written books in the past.
Yeah.
And now you have a book coming out fairly soon, or actually it's in progress. It's a Manning book about AWS CloudFormation. Could you tell us a little bit about this book and the writing process you put into this?
Yeah. This is really a fun and exciting project for me. I mean, I started working with AWS really seriously in 2012, and I've built a few things on AWS with teams that I've been involved with, small companies and larger companies. I've migrated some legacy systems over to AWS, and Perforce. A lot of our customers have their own data centers, with giant VMware is one of our customers. I hope I can say that. Probably it's okay. Yeah, they've spoken at our conference.
We'll beat that part out.
Some of our customers, they're secret,
yeah, I'm sure.
And very big. And so, I think as recently as 3 years ago, the cloud was not something these people with millions and millions of files and petabytes of data in our version control system thought would be feasible, right? And
exactly.
And now it actually is. And so that's something that I've worked on a lot since I came to Perforce, and I actually decided to do the AWS certifications that I have, and one that I'm planning on completing in the next couple of months, because I thought I knew a lot about AWS, but I'm, reading all these blog posts by people and learning, and I'm like, well, I should kind of try to calibrate how much I do actually know, and it was really interesting that, there's so much constantly evolving, that, you can never know everything, I think, but I decided to focus on, of course, learning things that I don't know, but also, I mean, for years, I have built data centers, right? I built, at the dawn of the internet in the .com era, I built some very specialized application service provider applications, and which is what they sort of call, things that were hosted on the internet in those days that weren't websites, right? I don't know that term. And then I built some SaaS applications and built the infrastructure because you had to, right? And
you had to do everything.
Yeah. And I had people that worked for me. We worked together, teams, really, really closely. I had one really good friend the other day call me. He's a DevOps guy now. He still works for the company that I worked for like 17 years ago. I was the founder of this company, and it's really cool. It was sold to the Japanese copier company Ricoh in 2015, which is really interesting. So I founded some companies also, but he's still there. And he reminded me that back in those days, I called the infrastructure we were building a garden of pure ideology, which I got from a 1994 commercial. So it was kind of like I was turning it into a good thing, even though it was Big Brother, which is kind of the SRA mantra, I think, a little bit.
Nice.
It's like, different culture, but so that was a big ramble. So I started writing about and thinking a lot about infrastructure as code, right? Which is brings together. I was a developer back in the old days, and got into product management. So and was a very I would consider many more product managers than when I started doing product management are now developer friendly, right?
Yes.
And so that's something, I feel like I was part of a vanguard of people doing that because I had so much tech experience, so much, hands-on. And then I had the writing too. So long story long, I wrote this blog about infrastructure as code. And I talked about CloudFormation in it because I was kind of in love with it. And I was, deeply immersed in the AWS world. So it was the logical thing to use. And one of the acquisition editors at Manning saw it and reached out to me and was like, "Hey, would you like to write a book on this?" And I'm like,
Nice.
"Wow, interesting, very flattering." And so we talked, for a while, and went back and forth with a proposal,
Mm-hmm.
and lo and behold, here we are. So the book is now in this MEAP program, MEAP, which is the Manning Early Adopter Program, and it's just been incredible working with Manning because they have such a great process. I mean, I've read their books before;
Mm-hmm.
they have great books, and the books go online first in this MEAP. You know, I'm online with MEAP with 4 chapters of the book. I just wrote the 5th chapter. It will be available for the readers who have bought the MEAP, which is,
Yes.
there's a lot of discount codes. I think you have a discount code.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I heard you mention that on one of the other episodes, but which is awesome, right? So, and then not only do people get the content early, but they comment on it, right? So I get notified when people post in the forum that's attached to the book, and they are incredibly constructive. I mean, the feedback is fantastic. So by the time the book comes out in print, and it's on Amazon later this year, it's going to be
Yep.
bulletproof, right? Everybody will, So
That's
go on.
That's
Yeah,
really a brilliant program, because obviously you're writing the book and you're bouncing ideas and checking your concepts and your designs against people that are actually using the technology. So
yeah,
it's not like a typical book where you write it and release it and then I find a bunch of errors, I have to send a new edition, etc. This is
yeah,
like an evolving masterpiece. It's
yeah,
really just really a great concept, I find.
yeah,
And
yeah. It's fantastic.
you said the reviews you're getting from this, I'm sure there's some good and bad, but I mean, generally, how has the feedback been so far?
Yeah. So, the book is really, it's based on my experience over the years. It's funny. As a developer, when I learned how to program, there were hardly even books, right?
Mhm.
And
Just smoke signals, huh?
exactly, you had to be sitting next to somebody, really, at
Yeah.
a college, right? And I would pick up people's printouts and type them in. This is a long time ago, obviously. And now there's so much code you can experiment, but there's still things that, and you can read all the blogs you want. And so what I'm trying to do with the book is to fill in the blanks and make it faster for people to learn these
Yep.
things and have a progression from the simplest to the most complex, right? And so the reviewers, so before it even went into MEAP, Manning had a panel of 19, varied background. I would call them judges. That's how I felt.
Well,
Who,
once you talk technology, I mean, you're going to have super strong opinions, right?
yeah, yeah,
And you have to take it with a grain of salt, because obviously many people feel, they have their blinders on and it's only correct this way. And you just have to kind of judge the best way forward. And
yeah,
that's, you obviously have lots of blog posts and different things, and it's just how the tech world has developed over time.
yeah.
And
It,
you
it was
can't,
like,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no. You're absolutely right. I think you characterized it really, really well. So, I'm waiting for like a week and a half for the feedback. They've got this great
Yeah.
questionnaire for the people. One of the questions is, on a scale of, on the Amazon scale, how many stars would you give this book, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for my reviews, and so really, there was so much incredibly constructive feedback in these reviews. I mean, there were people who gave me 4 out of 5 stars,
Mhm.
and then 3 or 4 pages of line by line notes on things that I could improve, right? And I
That's
was
great.
like, wow, I mean, so great.
And that's the kind of
That's,
feedback you need. You
yeah,
need because the feedback where this is horrible and they don't provide feedback,
yeah,
that serves no purpose. I mean, it brings
yeah,
no value to the table.
right.
If
It's like
you point out something and say, "Hey, this is the way it should be," or my suggestion, that's really great feedback. Now,
yeah,
I'm going to challenge you with a tough question now. Since you wrote the book AWS CloudFormation in Action for Manning, I have to ask you about Terraform.
yeah.
And it's basically CloudFormation versus Terraform. And I can't really say versus, but let's do a comparison.
Mhm.
Where do you see the value of each?
Yeah. So, I mean, Terraform is incredibly strong, and I have not worked with it as much as I have with CloudFormation, right? And other things, even like Chef, right?
Mhm.
And which I don't put in the same category as these two tools, quite frankly, at this point. But and that's in chapter 1 of the book, that discussing the differences. But so the Terraform, and I will say also that I have colleagues that are working with Terraform, and I've used their code to deploy things often, right?
Mhm.
Like we have um, uh, a Prometheus and Grafana monitoring application that goes with our version control system, and
Nice.
yeah, and it's on GitHub. We're on GitHub, which is a fairly recent thing that we've done in the last year because
Nice.
we had our own sort of GitHub-like thing from the 90s. Now, now
Exactly.
and it's like, no, this should be on GitHub, right?
It's a great marketing tool as well. I mean, I find
It's
we get a lot of inbound sales leads from GitHub, believe it or
yeah,
not, just because we put our code out there.
yeah, and the community aspects of it are unparalleled, and we wanted to have community engagement on the things that we were doing with the system. So, but but so so Terraform, is used by our professional services people as an example extensively for the multi-cloud, right? Which and even with VMware, right? It's being used by them, and so I would say that and the community, as I was writing that blog originally about infrastructure as code, and becoming obsessed with it. I read the Gruntworks book, and I'm like, wow, this is a great book.
Yep.
And so it's become a great example of how you do this. Obviously, now um, differences, there's a lot of different opinions out there. I mean, one would believe, and it's been my experience that most things you want to do on AWS are supported by CloudFormation one way or another now, right?
And very, very close to the release. So usually when
Yeah,
the service is available, CloudFormation is either
it's
available from day one or shortly behind the release.
yeah, I think that it has very much achieved first class status, and there are people at AWS who are CloudFormation exclusive, technical people. And then there's this huge community around it too. And I think that interestingly, YAML opened the floodgates to a lot more people adopting it, right? And if people don't
Yes.
know in the audience here, it does JSON and YAML, and JSON was around for a few years earlier.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of other stuff in AWS that is JSON, right?
Yes.
So it's something that you want to know, right? And I guess Terraform also, the alternative to their HCL, right, is JSON, a flavor of JSON.
Exactly.
They've
Which
done
is
it.
relatively new as well. It
Yeah,
wasn't always around. It's
yeah,
within the last version or two. So I
yeah,
mean, you brought up another topic. So I mean, CloudFormation versus Terraform. I see, from our experiences, Terraform is like the multi-cloud, Whereas, if you're going Amazon and you want to do something quick, you want all the services to have supported, then CloudFormation. But you brought up the topic JSON versus YAML, and that's a whole nother debate in itself. I mean, it's people are very passionate about JSON, and you get the YAML, but then if you go too far YAML, you're into Kubernetes land and you're just over YAMLed.
So I've done all of the exercises so far in the book with JSON, right? So I kind of had a really, really hard decision to make, and I discussed this with the folks at Manning as well. And I'm like, this is like the toughest choice here. We'd arrived on the outline of the whole book's table of contents, and so the saving grace of that is that if somebody wants to use YAML, right, there's this thing called the CloudFormation Designer, where you can load in the JSON and turn it into YAML.
And just convert it back and forth. Yeah, that's beautiful.
And vice versa. Yeah. So, and I haven't seen it fail on me once. So that's something you can do. And I may end up doing that later when I have some breathing room. So I get a couple of chapters ahead. I may put that all, do the conversion, test things, and put it on GitHub where the rest of the code is for the book. A lot of people have done that too, where they do both on their blog post. But a blog post is different even than a chapter of the book.
For sure. I mean, it's a lot more effort for sure. I mean, following the guidelines and all these things, it is a lot of work. I wrote a few chapters, so I can really praise you for writing a book, because I mean, just those chapters took me a long time.
It's definitely a small hill to climb for every chapter. And
this brings us to the next topic, is Amazon CDK. So I mean, we have CloudFormation, we have Terraform, but CDK is kind of the new kid on the block. It's only been around a couple of years. What's your thoughts about CDK?
So in some ways you can look at it and you go, wow, this is sort of the answer to Terraform, right? But it isn't quite, unless, it ends up being on Azure or something, which seems hypothetically, but it will end up being on bare metal and, and on people's PCs, I'm sure, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's really interesting, and it's caused me to do more with TypeScript, which it's written in, actually, interestingly enough, but it's Python also. So those are the two, I would say, primary. And I'd say Python is more the language that people are using because everybody knows it. But
it's easy to get started with.
I mean, you write 10 lines in Python and it blows it up into a template that you would have slaved over for a day and a half, basically, is the story.
But that's also the black magic that's happening behind the curtain, is like you write 2-3 lines of Python and this magic CloudFormation templates spit out the back end that you have no idea if that's following best practices and all these things. So I mean, that's a bit the challenge for me, is like, how do I control this output?
And it is supposed to be pouring best practices in there, but I'm deep diving into it now, kind of reading ahead of my own book, because this is in one of the later chapters of the book, is about the CDK. We also talk about the SAM, the serverless application model, and things like that. But the adoption of the CDK is really, it's taking off because the idea, I think, appeals to people. And
exactly.
And it's, and I'm sure AWS is putting a lot of energy into it, and it's only going to get better. So
it's just lowering the entry point for people to deploy infrastructure, basically. So I mean, developers, if you know Python or your favorite programming language, you basically import the library and you can have AWS infrastructure. I mean, it's that simple. But again, is it the way you want it to be, crafted exactly? That's really Good questions.
And also the chapter that I just wrote in the book, chapter 5, is about managing change, right? And there are so many variables around managing change just with CloudFormation on AWS, right? That,
Yep.
how it changes things, right? There's, there are nuanced things that you can change that, if you haven't read everything, right, you may be surprised, right? And
exactly.
And so now you've got this other thing that's doing these, relatively maybe at this point black box things to generate these templates, which you can see then once they're done, right? But then you have all these other variables of what's going to happen when I deploy this, right? And I mean, fortunately, you can deploy things at scale, unlike what you could do before, right? Pre-cloud, right? So you can actually, turn on that crazy massive infrastructure that you built with that and see if it's what you were expecting. You can do it in a separate environment and not
then have a heart attack when the bill comes, and because some developers deploying like crazy in the background.
I've been so used to like being frugal, and just shutting things off that I just want to commit harakiri when I discover I left like a stack up from yesterday, And that is also
like I have like 10 cents randomly floating around. Like, where is this coming from? It like drives me nuts. I can't like pinpoint it in the bill or something. Oh,
right.
Right.
It's an art and science in and of itself too.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they're developing certifications on TCO and economics, which is wow. I mean, it's great that they've become so transparent actually about the pricing, but they sort of had to because it's so complicated, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what you have to understand is so many services and all these different teams have to integrate. I can understand the challenge because I've been on the other side of this before as well. So it is a challenging topic generally.
Yeah. And that was the big thing in this chapter also, is like a lot of the rest of the book is going to be assuming that you're on a team and you're working with other people. And so this chapter 5 was about teamwork and managing change in a team environment. And there's more to come on that too. So there's a whole DevOps chapter. So.
Well, Chuck, I've really enjoyed speaking to you today and like learning about your role. And also, I mean, your book is on my to-do list. So I'm finishing up a book right now. Then I'll be jumping into MEAP and hopefully I could provide some feedback as well.
It'd be great.
But I'm looking forward to you completing this book. I have one last question for you though. Over your right shoulder is that Macworld magazine poster on the wall.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So that's actually the first edition of Macworld magazine back there.
Really?
Which, when it first came out. Yeah. And I actually shared a building for my company with a framer. So he framed it for me. So it's in there, and I have another one too. But I actually built back in the day extremely high-end Macintosh computers for printing companies and ad agencies and catalogers who formerly were using like $1 million, page composition systems. This is in the 80s, right? Yeah. And the Macintoshes that I was building were after that, obviously, but they were like $250,000 Macintosh computers that were had 256 meg of RAM in them. It cost $100,000, and it was arbitrage, and it was. I mean, it's so incredible to believe they had like 2 gigabyte RAID arrays. I was talking to somebody the other day. So anyway, so I spent a lot of time in the Mac world, and And so my first book, actually, you mentioned earlier that I'd written other books. It was called Print Production Workflow: A Practical Guide, and it was about PDF, using PDF to actually print books and magazines and things like that, and using Macintosh workflows and crazy stuff like that. And it was pretty forward looking. I'm pretty proud of it. It's still like a textbook at like universities in Eastern Europe. So it's pretty crazy. It's been translated into a bunch of different languages. So that was my first book, and that was like sort of a detour into the world of graphics for a while there. That I did.
Well, awesome. That's a really cool story. I mean, it's such a nice magazine cover. Now it has like a real piece of history with you as well, right?
Yeah, it's impressive that you noticed that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm a Mac lover. I mean, my uncle worked at Mac or Apple when it was first starting out, and he like was a hacker as well. And he told me, he's like, you have to get a Franklin Ace 1000. And the Franklin Ace was like the first computer which was Apple and IBM compatible.
Yeah.
So you can run both programs. People don't realize it used to be like one or the other. It didn't work either way.
Yeah.
And this computer could actually run both. And it was like, dual floppies and really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's amazing where we were and where we are now, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was very exciting times. And I've always tried to remain on the bleeding edge of things a little bit, because it's more fun and exciting. And I mean, that's a good thing about my job in this book, is that I get to, broad exposure to all these cool things. And, it's still exciting for me, very much so. So.
Well, thank you again, Chuck, for taking the time. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to staying in touch and reading more of your book when it's published.
Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Well, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
You too. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Byte. You can find the show notes at thebyte.io and follow me on Twitter at I Do My Own Tricks.